Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts football podcast where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. As always, Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is episode 172. And Anthony, this is actually your first episode since Super Bowl 51. So I just want your thoughts on the general game.
So basically, me being a Miami Dolphins fan, we'll start off with that. And even with all of that said, this was one of my most favorite Super Bowls to watch. And I understand, you're a Dolphins fan, you're not supposed to root for the Patriots. Okay, fine. Look, that game was historic. That game was the best comeback, statistically at least, in the history of the NFL, in the history of the playoffs in college and a Super Bowl. So I don't know how you can't enjoy it. I, like everybody else, thought it was over when it was 28-3. I work at a restaurant, so we were kind of walking around kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Like I was comparing it to the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning when he got blown out by the Seattle Seahawks. I thought it was over. Walking around, then all of a sudden it became 28-9, then it became 28-17, and it was just and then it became 8 points, and slowly it was ticking away. And then that last drive, I was watching it with a buddy of mine who I worked with, who's a big Patriots fan, and he had the little Fitbit on, the little thing where you can tell the blood pressure or the heart rate or whatever it is, and that thing was high. That thing was sky high, man. That thing was... he was going so crazy because obviously the game was intense. And look, man, you can hate on the Patriots. That's fine. And I get it. They give you some reasons to do it, be it from Spygate to Flagate, which, by the way, it all stems.
Oh, and then there was one occurred this weekend, DroneGate, with the drone flying over.
There's always
Patrick,
something.
The Falcons practice. But
which, by the way, I talked about this on a sports show, I think it was either last week or the week before. Okay, and this has nothing to do with the Patriots or anything else like that. That's just some little side thing that has always irritated me. It's kind of like my little pet peeve. Okay, what are the two things that the Patriots are known for?
Okay, they're known for winning and they're known for cheating.
No. I mean the two scandals they had. What were they?
All right, Spygate and Deflategate.
Right. Both of those stem from from Watergate, right? They all kind of stem from the gate. Watergate had nothing to do with water. Why is everything blank gate, like Spygate, Deflategate, DroneGate? Watergate had nothing to do with water. It was a hotel. That's just I hate that so much. It's very lazy as far as just always making something gate when Watergate had nothing to do with water. Anyways, so this game was, it was great. Brady's probably the best of all time. You might want to hold on to Montana because he never lost and he never threw an interception in the Super Bowl. That's fine. But Brady's been to 7 and he's won 5 of them and he's giving you a good game every single time. This is the biggest, blowout, if you want to call it, in the history of the Super Bowl with him, which is 6 points. Everything else is either 3 or 4 points. He's a 4-time Super Bowl MVP. He threw for 466 yards in the game.
Which is a Super Bowl record, by the way.
He owns basically all the Super Bowl records, touchdowns, most points, most yards in a game, most wins, all these things. He owns all these records, man. And yeah, you can say the road he took this year was pretty easy, but this was his 5th, man. And maybe the road to it was easy, but this game definitely wasn't. He had to come back from 25 points down. The game was insane. The game was, from the third quarter, from the halfway into the third quarter on, it was just a slow... it was like watching a TV show, honestly, because there's sometimes you watch a TV show where you can see these small things coming and it slowly builds and builds and builds and builds, and that's what this game was. By the time the overtime happened and they got the ball, it was just they're going to win this game. Once they called heads and they got the ball, it was they're going to win this game. And poor Matt Ryan's just sitting on the sideline just well, all right, this stinks. I can't do anything about this, right? So, and it was just methodical, and he was Brady slowly every time, just 10 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards, 13 yards, just slowly just taking him down the field every single time. And look, he's the best, and it doesn't look, at least from that game, I guess the second half of that game, that he's going to stop anytime soon. He could still do this for another year or two, and at that point, who knows? Maybe he gets 6. And, that game, man, that game was something that I don't think we're ever going to see again, obviously, because before that, the biggest comeback was 10 points. But, this whole thing was just, it was insane. I don't know how to describe it other than insane.
Yeah, and that's the best way to It's one of the ways to describe it. I think it was an unbelievable game. I think everyone that I watched it with was like, man, they weren't paying attention. Well, first of all, I was watching the game with a lot of people that don't generally pay attention to football like I do. Mm-hmm. And, they're like, oh, this is it's going to be blood. It's going to be like when the Broncos and the Seahawks play. And I was like, no. You can't count out Tom Brady in these type of big game moments. And the thing I talked about a couple of days ago on this show was that the Falcons kind of got away from the run game a little bit. They really did. And I think that's one of the main key components that made them lose this game. And speaking of Atlanta, their offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan, is now officially the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. And, man, he has a very long road ahead of him. But as for Atlanta, to replace him, they decided to go with Steve Sarkisian as the new offensive coordinator. He was the Alabama offensive coordinator for the national championship game against Clemson because, Lane Kiffin was, quote-unquote, let go. Well, he was let go. And then he was named the head coach of Florida Atlantic University. So Sarkisian, I actually think this is actually a really good spot for him to be at if he wants to get back into head coaching, because I do think Steve Sarkisian, I do think he will be a head coach again, but he got a lot of personal issues got in the way during his time at USC, and in Washington, he, most of the guys on that team now, the seniors and all that were most of his guys. So he kind of turned around Washington a little bit before Chris Peterson got there. And USC, his first year was great, but a lot of the personal issues that happened with Sarkisian, kind of had to do with his firing there. And he's only been an NFL coach once, I think in 2004 with the Oakland Raiders. He was under Norv Turner. But I do think this is a chance for Steve Sarkisian to get into head coaching again. If he happens to have a really good tenure with the Atlanta Falcons, I can see him, for a couple of seasons now. I can see him honestly get a head coaching position, in the NFL. He can even go to college too. So I think this is a very good opportunity that Steve Sarkisian couldn't waste. And we all know, we all hear the stories about Nick Saban, how hard it is to work with him. And, he has, Steve Sarkisian has the MVP in Matt Ryan. He has an all-pro receiver. He has 2 great running backs. So he's going to be pretty all right, I might say.
It's interesting with Sarkisian, right, because he, for a game, was the offensive coordinator for Alabama. And that game he lost, but, still did pretty well, all things considered. And it was kind of now the point, what do you want to do? Do you want to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama, or are you going to be fighting for, basically the top spot every single year, but you have to get yelled at by Nick Saban? Or do you want to go to the pros, and now you have to have the pressure of following the guy, right? Because that's never the thing you really want to do. You never want to follow the guy. You want to be the guy that follows the guy. And for Sarkisian, he's following Kyle Shanahan, who basically made their offense one of the best of all time, right? He made Julio Jones and Matt Ryan and Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman and all of them, so knew everybody, this offense that you basically couldn't keep up with, right? Like, you might be able to, hold them down a little bit, but they're still going to get their points, right? I think it was like 540 points, which was 7th all time in the history of the NFL. Now you have the situation where you get Sarkisian to come in, and let's say, because they were only 11-5 this year, right? It wasn't like they were like 14-2. Let's say they just regress a little bit, because also you got to remember the team that loses the Super Bowl doesn't generally make it back. We saw Carolina not make it back. We've seen it in the past. Even the Patriots, they make it back, but they're kind of the anomaly to the rule. You have the situation where with the Patriots, they win, the Falcons, now that they lost, you have all these things kind of up in the air, right? So now that Shanahan's gone, you get him brought in, and let's say they go 9-7, not even 10. Let's go 9-7. They lose 2 more games. their offense goes from 540 to call it like 460 or something like that. Like they just kind of go down a little bit, not a lot, from like, just a little bit down. Now all of a sudden you're looked at worse, right? Because you didn't keep expectations where they were supposed to be. And it's not even that now, because you have that situation for the head coach, right, who has to deal with all these different things. But you also have the situation where now not only is the offensive coordinator gone, but the defensive coordinator that was reported earlier, he's out too. And now you get, I think it's the defensive line coach. He's also gone. So you basically have all this upheaval.
Yeah, and don't forget the quarterback's coach is going to be the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams as well. So they're completely going to complete a turnover for the entire staff, basically.
Yeah. So this whole situation's getting kind of, turned upside down for Sarkisian. And I get it for Sarkisian, right? Because he went from literally a year ago, total just, I don't even know what you want to call it. Like, it's not even like a public shaming because he basically went away after it. But once he was fired, he kind of was out of it. And you're like, okay, he may not get a coaching job ever again. And literally went from that to like offensive assistant, consultant, whatever you want to call it, when he was in Alabama, to the offensive coordinator, to now the offensive coordinator in the pros. Like, he did a kind of a meteoric kind of leap in the span of about a year. And he's a good coordinator, don't get me wrong. Like, he done really well a lot of the places that he's gone, but this is going to be a lot of stuff for him because he has to basically deal with the pressure now of being in Atlanta and the situation where that division itself, you still got the Panthers, they're still there, and you still got the Buccaneers. Yeah, maybe the Saints aren't good, but you got to deal with their offense. So it's going to be interesting for Sarkisian, and it's a big gamble because you basically said, I don't want to get yelled at by Nick Saban, and I want to go to the pros. So cool, have fun, but it might not work out how you hope.
Yeah, it is a big risk because, you look at the past history of Sarkisian, with him at his time at USC. He had a couple of good seasons at Washington.
Right.
Because before he came there, Washington was a terrible program.
Mm-hmm.
USC, you can practically say he can be, part of the turnaround there a little bit. He had a really great first season at USC. A lot of personal issues got in the way with him. And it is a lot, Alabama, they have had trouble holding on to offensive coordinators, but, in college football, it's hard to hold on to great offensive coordinators. If you look all the way to 2007, Major Applewhite was offensive coordinator. He's the head coach of Houston now. You got Jim McElwain, Florida, and then you got Doug Newsomeyer. He went to Florida with Jim McElwain. And then you got Lane Kiffin, he's at Florida Atlantic. Now you got Sarkisian now with the Falcons. So, it's tough to hold on to great offensive coordinators in college football. And as for the guys that to replace Sarkisian now, they're really two big names. And it's funny because they used to be the head coach for the same school. And that is Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich. They're being considered for the Alabama offensive coordinator job. Me, personally, I think this will be a good opportunity for Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich to get back into the college football game and perhaps get another coaching job. Because I do think these, Chip Kelly, he is solely responsible for the turnaround of Oregon. Because before Chip Kelly got there, Oregon was probably one of the most irrelevant college programs. Right, in college, and it was like they were only known for their uniforms, but then when they started winning, they were known for winning. So they were known for that big explosive offense that Chip Kelly implemented. And, Mark Helfrich was the guy to replace him, but he didn't. He was let go earlier this year, and who got replaced by Willie Taggart, who came from Sword in Florida. So I do think Chip Kelly would be the guy to replace Sarkisian. I think honestly he would probably only have to deal with Nick Saban yelling at him for 1 year. That's the only thing.
The thing is with all this is we just talked about, Lane Kiffin not wanting to deal with Nick Saban and all that stuff because you saw him on the sideline getting yelled at, and you saw with Sarkisian, maybe he didn't want to deal with Nick Saban as well. And part of that can be ego, and part of that can be, they were both head coaches at one time, and now you're getting yelled at by, obviously, a superior head coach, but still getting yelled at by another head coach, right? There's kind of an ego blow in that. Now you can take Chip Kelly, who, to be fair, has had his ego, knocked down a peg or two since he got to the pros, right? But still, now you're going to go from full control in Philly to just the poop show that was the San Francisco 49ers. So now you're going to go down to college, which isn't really necessarily going down to college if you're going to Alabama, but now you're going to go back down to college, and now you're going to get yelled at by Nick Saban. Like, yeah, it helps you out with your career, but you got to deal with that for a year just to get basically back up to the position that you want to be at, because I equate the whole Alabama situation to when you were little, just like that was your punishment, right? Like if you did something wrong, you went there, you did whatever your punishment was, sit in your room, go. I had to do weird things when I was punished. Like I had to chop wood outside and bring it inside. My parents were weird, they were just like doing stuff around the house, but it was like a lot of chores that was like, busy work and stuff like that. But you'd have to do all these things just to finally get back to even, right? To get back to not being in trouble. So I equate that to going to Alabama, right? You have to go over there, get yelled at for about a year or two, and then once they're successful again, it's like, oh, wow, look, you can actually do stuff good. And then you go over and then you get a successful job somewhere else, right? It's kind of the whole thing with Belichick, right? Belichick's coaching tree is pretty long. They're not really good, but it still has a lot of people. Josh McDaniels left and was a failure and came back. You get people like Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel. You get all these people that have left and haven't done so well, but you learned on the knee of the best coach in that, particular sport. And then you get the success, but you got to deal with that for a couple of years. So you got to deal with Nick Saban for about a year or two, and then you can go be successful again. Because if Chip Kelly goes there and their offense can get even better than it was this year with Lane Kiffin, then all of a sudden after a year or two, people will be like, okay, well, maybe Chip Kelly's learned his lesson. All right, now let's give him a head coaching job at insert place here. Like if he wants to stay in the Pac-12, okay. Well, now let's give him a job at, let's just call it, UCLA or something like that. If all of a sudden Moore doesn't start doing well, or Washington State, if I can't think of the old Texas Tech head coach's name, but if he starts doing poorly, you can go to these places. You
can even throw Notre Dame in there, Brian Kelly.
Sure, you can do all these different things, but you just have to basically wait it out for a year. So it should be interesting to see whoever the head coach the offensive coordinator for Alabama is, and if they're successful where they go a year or two from now, once they basically get their, certificate of authenticity from Nick Saban and get to be, a successful head coach somewhere else.
And can you imagine Jalen Hurts playing in the Chip Kelly offense? That would be insane.
That would be a lot, yeah.
Let's take a look at the season that Jalen Hurts had under. Let's just take a look at the season that he had. And can you imagine if Jalen Hurts is going to get better? He was a freshman.
Right.
Can you imagine him playing in a Chip Kelly offense? That is insane. I think that offense will get a whole lot better. And no, I just want to point something out. I think the last three offensive coordinators from Alabama have come from the Pac-12, so it wouldn't be a surprise if Chip Kelly or Mark Helfrich, gets named to that position. But me personally, I do think this is probably the last chance for Chip Kelly to get a coaching job this year.
Right.
But I really do think he'll be back in 2018 if he can't find anything for 2017. But we're going to take our first break. And what are we going to talk about? Are we going to talk about the overtime rules, or are we going to talk about some anti-Goodell stuff from the Patriots? Or you want to wait for that?
We'll go Goodell last. We'll go Goodell for the last part of the show, yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to stick to the Super Bowl theme of the show, kind of, sort of. And we're going to discuss if the NFL should change the overtime rules after the Super Bowl. So we will talk about that when we get back to the Going to Meet Concepts Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, and we talked about Super Bowl 51 earlier in the show, and the game ended in overtime, the first overtime game in history. Before we go on with our discussion here, Anthony, when the game was going to overtime, I was all saying, did the NFL sell any advertisement time for overtime? So I was like, what kind of commercials were we going to get?
I mean, that's true.
That's the one thing I was worried about.
They never had overtime, so it's not like they were used to it.
Yeah, but to be serious here, there was a lot of people saying that the overtime rules were unfair. I feel like the Falcons should have got a possession there. Well, to be fair, I think the Falcons, they should have stopped the Patriots from scoring. But to be fair, also, I feel like a touchdown shouldn't end the game in overtime. I feel like each team deserves a possession, and whoever scores, let's just say the Patriots score, right? They scored that touchdown, and Falcons, they scored a touchdown. I just feel like they should keep going until, like sudden death, like in college. But, I do see the reasoning why they don't do that, because, of injuries and all that, some sort. This is the Super Bowl, though. I feel like they should have, they do have overtime rules for postseason games instead of regular season games.
Well, you can't tie in postseason, but I mean, the thing is, like, I understand what you're talking about. Like, I understand you want to basically make it as even and fair as possible. Also, I mean, they scored a touchdown, right? The Patriots had to win the game. Let's say they had a chance to have the Falcons come back and score again. I mean, they might have tied the game up, but I mean, man, do you think they actually would have? Like, that game, if there's any indication, they were mentally out at that point. And, to be fair, they had a chance, the Falcons did, to make it 11, before Matt Ryan got he got sacked. It was a holding, and then he had the incompletion pass. And then, even at the end of the game, after Brady got his touchdown and tied the game, they had a chance at that point. Like, they had a few chances to do things. And, you can go back to the whole, okay, well, your defense needs to help you out also. Your defense needs to be the thing that makes it so you don't, have to rely so much on your offense. And the defense was gone by that point because they had run 90-something plays. The Patriots had, so they were gassed, understandably so. I would have liked to see that, because in a sense, you make it a little bit more fair, but you obviously couldn't do it for that game. You have to change it now going forward for the entirety of the season, right? You basically say, like, okay, the offense gets a chance, the defense gets a chance, and then after that point, if it goes 7 points for, like, if the Patriots would have scored a touchdown and then the Falcons would have scored a touchdown, then all of a sudden it's, all right, next one wins. Period. You both had a shot. You both had offense and defense had a chance. Now from there, have at it, do whatever you want. If you want to, go for two, if you're the second team to get the ball because you want to win at that point, you don't want the defense to have another shot, then fine. But going forward, I wouldn't mind that. But for the game, I had no problem with it because that's, how the rules are set up. And this was the first time in 51 shots they had an overtime, so there's no way you could really plan for it. Yeah,
and I do like your point that, touchdown, next score. But, I kind of have to disagree with those people that feel like, they should have changed the overtime rules. I feel like if the Falcons were good enough to win the game, they would have stopped the Patriots offense. That's just me. Mm-hmm. That's just me. And it would have been great to see the Falcons score again. But for this game, I feel like if they were good enough to win the game. They should have never let the game go to overtime. I feel like they should have won the game in regulation. They should have had a field goal after that Julio Jones catch in the fourth quarter. But, the play calling from Kyle Shanahan was questionable at the end. But, there's a couple of rules that I wanted to say that, according to the NFL, the overtime rules in the postseason games, there is one if the score is tied at the end of an overtime period, or if the second team's initial possession has not ended, the teams will play another overtime period, which is double overtime. And then there will be a 2-minute intermission between each overtime period. There will not be a halftime intermission after the second overtime period. So basically, if they would have had double overtime, it would have been basically like another half, basically, except it would have been shorter. Can you imagine if Lady Gaga came back? And then she probably left the building after that.
That wasn't a bad halftime show. It wasn't, Prince or something like that, but it still was pretty good. That wasn't terrible.
It wasn't terrible. And let's just say the game went to triple overtime. There would have been another coin toss. And then after that, each team gets 3 timeouts during the half, so they kind of treat it like another half. This is a thing that I would have loved to see, just because if there is still no winner at the end of a fourth overtime period, there will be another coin toss, and play will continue until a winner is declared. So I think the fifth overtime would have been. Can you imagine if the game would have went that long? A football game, like 4 overtimes,
I think
5
we would
overtimes.
I think we would have turned on the game at that point. Would have been like, all right, look, like we would have been even more mad at the Patriots. Have been like, all right, look, God, just someone score. I don't care who it is. Somebody score. I have to go to bed. Because imagine people on the East Coast, like we're on the West Coast.
Not only that, but you can imagine people that were like drinking the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, come on, man.
Like that was just been like, cause it ended for us, right around like 7, 8 o'clock, something like that. Now that's like 11 o'clock on the East Coast. I think it went to like 3 or 4 overtimes. It'd been like 2 o'clock in the morning. It'd been like, I just want to sleep. Please, somebody let me. Please, God, Brady, I don't care. Someone fall, do something. But like I said, I'm good with the overtime and how they do it now. I get it. It's totally fine. If you want to change it, that's fine too. But at the same time, dude, you had a 25-point lead. Like, you can only complain so much if you had a 25-point lead.
You should have won the game in regulation. You were winning 28-3. But I do think that they should change, the scoring. I do think. I just feel like the first team that has the ball and they score a touchdown, I don't know. I kind of think the other team deserves another chance to score, and then after that, you can have a winner. I just feel like in overtime, I feel like both teams should have at least one shot, and
they do as long as you don't score a touchdown.
Yeah, that. Yeah, but I feel like a touchdown shouldn't determine the end of the game if the other team they get another chance. That's one thing I have a problem with, but
he did have to go 75 yards though. That's a long way to drive.
It's
not like with the field goal where you only have to go like 40 yards. Like he went 75 yards. He went all the way down there.
Yeah, and he did. That was a very impressive. Man, Tom Brady had a very impressive final 2 drives. Probably one of the best 2 drives I've ever seen in Super Bowl history, and that is Tom Brady. If you think about Tom Brady, the type of final drives that he had to win Super Bowls, those were pretty amazing to me. So you said that the overtime rules are fine, and I do think they could tweak them a little bit, but as of now, I think I'm fine. I'm fine with it. The way that this game played out, I feel like the Falcons should have won in regulation. The only thing I have a problem with the overtime games is in the regular season when we have a tie. I absolutely hate ties. Absolutely hate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
it just seems like a weird thing to do in 2017 is to have a tie game and just have something that makes it so that way you can win the game. But we had 2 this year. We almost had another one.
All right. Well, we're going to have to move on. This is going to be a discussion. Probably for the entire off season, especially with the owners' meetings in the spring.
Right.
But we're going to take our last break. We're going to get into some anti-Roger Goodell stuff from the New England Patriots, and we all know how they feel about the commissioner. We're going to talk about all the chaos. We can get back to the Guns to Meet Concepts Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Well, the New England Patriots, they had their victory parade yesterday. And, man, there was a pretty eventful for a variety of reasons. We saw Ron Gronkowski pretty much go shirtless, chug a beer, and one of the most Gronk photos ever.
I mean, they got the championship wrestling belt above him, which I feel is just better. Like, I feel like that makes it more accurate for Gronkowski.
Exactly, And you got to think about it, too. Gronkowski is in the Boston. Okay, they're going through, I think they was in Boston, right? Was it the parade? Okay. It's February. It's cold.
Mm-hmm.
He has his shirt off. So I just gotta tell you that right there.
Liquid courage, man.
Man, I just feel like Gronkowski is just one of those guys you really want to hang out with, but you're gonna regret it probably the morning after.
Oh, that's fine.
You're like, that's okay. And then we got actually after the game, I believe there was a commercial that featured Tom Brady, and I talked about this on Monday's show that kind of throwed hella shade towards Roger Goodell. Throwing the shade. It was for an MRI company called Shields, and there was I believe a woman in a white coat. I think it was like playing a doctor of some sort, and telling Tom Brady, to put stuff in his locker so, it won't scan in an MRI. So he puts all 4 of his rings in the case in the locker. And then Tom Brady's all like, oh, my bad, I almost forgot this one. It's kind of new. He's all, and then the lady tells Tom Brady, you're going to need a bigger lockup case. He was like, yeah, roger that.
Oh, it's bellissimo. It's just so molto bene. So good, man. Like, that whole thing, like, it was just... Like, again, not a Patriots fan, but I am here for these jokes. We talked about this. I am here for these jokes. I am here, and you didn't get as many of them during the game, right? Because that was the whole main thing of just like once the game was over with, it's like, okay, are they actually going to go back and do this stuff again? Are they going to be able to basically, get them to have all of these jokes be on the field? And the only thing you really saw was, they had a weird handshake, Goodell and Brady did. And you had the situation where, Kraft got on the microphone and basically said, like, this is the most, popular one, for reasons I won't get into, kind of threw a little bit of shade, which people are like, oh, that wasn't as much as I thought it would be. But don't fear. They had you, don't worry about it. They were going to get you later on. And basically, once the game ended and they had their parades, once they basically got off of the flight, or hell, once the game ended, once you had the commercials start off afterwards, then all the Goodell jokes happened. Then the Roger that with the rings. Then you had the situation where the defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, who got off the plane in it looked like they have that, like, the Chive shirt, which has, like, Bill Murray on it.
It's from Barstool Sports.
Yeah.
And
it had Goodell with a clown nose on. But I'm saying it looked kind of like that Bill Murray Chive shirt.
Yeah, it did.
And they had that one. Not only that, but then you also had, I think it was Danny Amendola, who had a hat on after the fact, wear a Fire Goodell hat. You had Rob Gronkowski, who basically got, on the parade and, got on the microphone and was just like, how do we feel about Goodell? And people were like, boo. He's like, and then he gets on there, boo, because it's, Gronkowski and he doesn't do anything subtle. And just the whole team, right? Brady got his jokes off. Goodell had to sit there while even someone like Danny Amendola, who doesn't play that much, gets the jokes off. The defensive coordinator, Belichick, I'm surprised, didn't say anything. Kraft, threw a little bit of a shot. This whole season was just about them basically getting revenge on Goodell. And now, because there's only one thing left, right? There's only one remaining juicy morsel left. And that's basically having the situation where he has to come to Foxborough for opening night where they, raise the banner. That's it. That's the thing that's left. And if he doesn't go there, then you have no excuse, right? Like, you have to go to that game, right? I can at least somewhat understand and justify not going to New England for the AFC championship game and the one AFC divisional round. Like, I can get not going to New England for that because you had the potential ending of the Georgia Dome. I get it. That's fine. You at least have that kind of built-in excuse. If he doesn't go to Foxborough for the opening game of the season, man, you're gonna. And the thing is, if he goes, you may think like, oh, well, they won the Super Bowl, so it's over. They're all happy now.
It's not going to be over at all.
Have you
No.
Let me start off by saying this. I like some of the Boston teams. When the Celtics won, I thought that was really cool. When the Red Sox won, I thought that was really cool, especially after 2013, the last one they got, when Poppy was, this is our bleeping city and everything. Thought that was fantastic. Also, Boston fans kind of are mad all the time. All of the time. They are always upset with people, and they are going to be mad at Goodell for the rest of time as long as he is the commissioner, or actually as long as he exists. As long as he's alive, they're going to be mad at him. It's going to be like 95 years old, they're still going to boo him. Did you hear how loud they booed him when he got on the thing? It was loud, man. It wasn't the thing of just like, oh, we don't like you, boo. No, it was loud. And they weren't even in New England. They were in Houston. You know how far it is from Houston to New Orleans? From New England to Boston? From Boston to Houston? It's far, man. And they were ready. They were ready for those boos, and they got him. Like, I don't know any kind of a worse boo. Like, maybe, I don't even know who would be worse. Like, there's, Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner, who gets booed every single time. But, I mean, Goodell, man, like, you got it all at that point. And he was trying so hard, which is the greatest thing. He was trying so hard to, like, power through it, like, not even acknowledging the boos. He's like, that was a great Super Bowl. Yeah, that was how the game was supposed to be played. Yeah, good job, Belichick. Good job, Brady. And just boo, just so loud in the background. But he has to go to New England. That's the thing. That's the one last thing he has to go through. That's the last, level on this video game that he has to go to. That's the last, bad guy that he has to go through or whatever.
So, pretty much, Tom Brady and the Patriots get the last laugh, and probably for a while. And I do got to say something about that Tom Brady Shields commercial. He actually filmed that before
September.
Yeah, he filmed it in September.
Yeah.
Like, who does that?
Balls.
Like, he was filming that. He was filming that when he was suspended.
Right. Yes.
He was filming that when he was suspended.
I don't know why I didn't think about that.
Oh my God. He was filming that when he was suspended. So he filmed it. He was confident, saying that he was going to win the Super Bowl. And man, the commercial would have never seen the light of day if the Falcons would have never collapsed.
No, they would not. It's kind of Super Bowl shuffle-y in that sense because you're so confident, but that might have been released before the actual Super Bowl, I think. But that is just like, I love that commercial.
I think this was like a local commercial.
Yeah, it was a local commercial. Yeah. But it's still like the fact that you're going to like basically, when you're suspended, going to get out there and be like, I got this, and just go over there and, the company that they were with, the hospital or whatever was probably just like, you want to make this commercial? He's like, oh yeah, no, let's go. And he's like, I got some ideas.
Yeah, he probably filmed it before he took his vacation to Italy or something like that.
To Ibiza.
To Ibiza with Giselle. But
that thing, it's just, I was here for these jokes, and I'm happy that it happened for no other reason than just all of the smack talk that happened after. Because I always like good trash talk, like when the Warriors lost to the Cavaliers and you had LeBron coming out with the Ultimate Warrior shirt on off the plane. You had the Halloween where they had the tombstones of the Warriors 3-1 blown lead. Like, all these good jokes I'm always here for. Like, I don't care who it is. Maybe if it's my team, then I feel a little bit worse about it. But if it's not my team, let's have some fun, man. Let's get some good taunting going on. Let's get some good just everything to make it more enjoyable because, you always like to have fun.
Oh, and then remember, Anthony, I'm not sure if you know this, that Tom Brady's jersey was stolen in Houston. There's a sign at the parade saying, Goodell stole Brady's jersey.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the few signs.
Well, James White forgot to keep the ball.
I know.
Which I get because it's all insane and it's chaotic and I get that point. Yeah. But, it's just great, man. Like, this whole... And then next year, like, I don't know if they're going to be as motivated next year for it, but if this is Brady's swan song, then, I mean, you can't really make it any better than that. Like, if this is your last defining moment, right, it's great. It's historic. It's legendary. It's going to go down in the history of time as one of the best comebacks, one of the best games of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely a top 5.
Yeah, like, I don't know if it's the best of all time because it's hard because I didn't watch all 50 games, front to back. Like, I started watching games around 1998 or so.
I started watching, I think the first Super Bowl I watched was the Ravens and the Giants.
Right.
That was the first one I watched.
Yeah, so, I mean, like, I've only been watching it for so long, almost 20 years, but not exactly. And it's something that, it's one of the best I've seen, don't get me wrong. Like, I think the most chaotic and crazy game, the one I can still not believe it actually happened, was 2007 season when the Patriots lost to the Giants. That season in 2008, that was still the craziest game I've ever seen being played. But as far as just like, because also this game for the first 3 quarters was a blowout. You can't say it's the best game ever if the first 3 quarters you're like, well, this is boring.
Well, the first quarter scoreless. And
sure.
Then it didn't become a blowout until probably like the third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason why I can't put this in the best game category because, there's some slow points, but every game has slow points. But there was a blowout.
But with all that said, this game still...
It's still definitely in the top 5. Though.
It's historic.
It has to be.
It's super historic. It's maybe Brady's lasting legacy because you came back from the biggest deficit in the history, of the Super Bowl, and he wins. He beat Goodell. He may have been able to beat Goodell if he would have taken it to a higher court because another thing that I just kind of realized later on, Brady, his last hurrah, right, with this whole Deflategate thing was what? It was taken it to the Supreme Court, right? And while you might have thought like, oh, well, the Supreme Court's not going to rule in his favor. Yeah, maybe not. Also, don't forget about who his good buddy is in a high place in political power.
Now. Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah,
so who knows if he had actually won that or not.
I think he might have won.
Like, maybe he wouldn't have won it, but I just kind of realized that. It's like, he's kind of boys with Trump and that whole thing.
He has a pretty good friend that's in office right now.
Like, that could have actually been more chaotic than you would actually have thought if he would have kept going. Because I wouldn't have been ended, because he stopped the whole thing around August, right? July or August, something like that. It's when he basically said, like, all right, cool, never mind, Goodell, you win. This thing could have stretched out for 6 months. Could have stretched out till January 20th when, the new guy came in.
Oh, my God. I can't think of the... Oh, my God. It would have been so chaotic if... Can you imagine if Deflategate would have happened this year? Like, let's just say that happened this year. And can you imagine the chaos that would have happened... with the Supreme Court, with who's in charge right now, who has a really good relationship with not only Tom Brady, but Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft.
And Kraft.
So
no, this whole thing, like, and just all the Patriots stuff, man. It helps the Patriots with the fact that they won, keeping the hatred with them because now that they won, now it's just like, because also. Let's say they win next year, right? I'm not saying like, oh, they're going to win next year. I'm not doing some undefeated thing where it's just like, who wins Super Bowl 52? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. Now, let's say they do win. You realize if they win next year, that's twice that they won 3 out of 4. And
that is amazing. Honestly, I have to say, like, we're probably never going to get this kind of dynasty again in the NFL because look at how the game has changed with free agency and all that. We're never going to get this type of dynasty ever again.
Free agency, we're not. You take the best coach of all time, you take the best quarterback of all time, you take the situation that, everything just kind of worked out right because of Bledsoe didn't get his knee or his spleen cracked, basically. And if Belichick didn't decide to leave the Jets literally days after he got hired on a napkin that basically says, I quit, none of this happens, which is all kind of strange, but best coach, best quarterback of all time, and if they win it next year, I mean, then Brady has more Super Bowls than 31 other teams.
Oh, and
or 30 other teams, I guess, because the Patriots have 6.
That is amazing, and I just got to say that, we did talk about a certain guy in office right now. He also hates Roger Goodell. He called him a dope.
He does.
He called him a dope.
Yeah.
So we're just going to leave it on that note. But, great episode today, Anthony. We will be back tomorrow to discuss any type of news that happens over the next 25 hours. 25 hours. Oh, my God. I gave us an extra hour. 24 hours. Oh, my gosh. Boy. All right. In the next 24 hours. This is the Going to Meet Concepts Football Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And we'd like to thank you guys for tuning in, and see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.